Welcome to episode 51 of No Rares Required. Every week I go into a strategy for a specific color pair or archetype in draft. So this is a draft skeleton for my strategy or approach, and there are many different strategies that you can take in an archetype. This is certainly not the only one, but this is the one that has been the most successful for me in this specific color pair. And the goal of this episode and the goal of this series is to help you draft infinitely, or at least increase your wins when drafting, because I believe that it is the easiest way to reach set completion and get a copy of all of the cards in the set. So this one is pretty equally split between green and white. You'll notice there's not a lot of splashing going on, which is certainly an option in this set. And but with that, let's get started. So one of the top performing white commons is Hopeful Vigil, and it's an enchantment that when it comes into play it creates a 2/2 knight, and what's nice about this is that it's two things coming into play at the same time, which is good for like Boros Celebration. But because the enchantment is left behind, it pairs really well with Stockpiling Celebrant, which we'll cover here shortly. That is a really good target for bringing it back into your hand. The other synergy that's really nice for Hopeful Vigil, because you get a Scry 2 when it goes into the graveyard, is it's really good for bargain cards. And like I showed in the beginning with the draft skeleton, I didn't splash heavily, and that's my tendency is to not usually splash, but you should definitely keep your eye open for it, because there are some very powerful cards in red, and Torch the Tower works especially well with bargain synergies. I think it performs best in Izzet, where you can pair it with Hatching Plans to draw. But you do have some red cards in the set that are interesting to play, like Imidane's Recruiter, that we'll get to when we cover the uncommons. There's other bargain synergies, though, that are available that you don't have to go out of your way. One of them is Archon's Glory. And what I really like about Archon's Glory is that it's a card that you can take advantage of, that it will wheel. A lot of times you do not have to take this the first time that you see it, and you can plan on picking it up when it comes back to you after pick 8. We've got Cooped Up, which is good in any white archetype where you are pressuring your opponent. It's a little less important if you are in just a controlling archetype. I like it to be able to, like on turn 4, be able to remove a blocker and continue to develop the board. Another nice synergy with Cooped Up, though, is that it pairs really well with the instant speed bargain, either Archon's Glory or Torch the Tower, because you can trigger the exile ability where you exile the enchanted creature, and before the enchantment resolves and goes to the graveyard because it's no longer enchanting anything, you can use it as a bargain fodder. You just have to remember to turn on full control. Cut In is another card that I think you should keep your eye out for as a splash, because it's removal and it creates a young hero role. So it works perfectly in this Selesnya archetype, which is very centered on the various role tokens in the set. And then Candy Grapple, I think you should also keep your eye out for the. Most of the time that I'm tempted to splash, it's for red, but there are a couple of black splashes. So I wouldn't splash black just for Candy Grapple, but if you're already going to go into the playing with multiple colors route, there's Shrouded Shepherd at uncommon, as well as Gingerbread Hunter, that both benefit off of having black. And then Fawn's Bane Troll in rare is also another black potential splash. So if you're already going down that road, keep your eye out. Candy Grapple has that same bargain synergies that you can use to get additional value out of your Hopeful Vigils. Red Tooth Genealogist is something that I think you should keep your eye out for in Selesnya. Its best archetype is Selesnya, and it's one of those that you can take not quite on the wheel, but definitely late. I like to try to pick these up around 7 or 8. One thing to note, though, is that it is a pretty bad 3-drop if it's your only creature on the board. So you definitely want to make sure that you have enough 1s and 2-drops so that this can reliably come into play and have a target to hit. Hollow Scavenger has been a great performer, a great common in every green archetype. And I like to use it as a signal. I think that because it's a good card in every green archetype, that if you do see these still around pick 6 or pick 7, that I use that as a sign that green is actually is open. And then we've got Stockpiling Celebrant, which I was talking about with the synergizes really nicely with the Hopeful Vigil, as well as Princess Takes Flight at uncommon. I do think that it's best in Orsov just slightly because of Hopeless Nightmare. The 1-cost black enchantment is just one card cheaper to bounce back to your hand than Hopeful Vigil, and being able to make them discard again and deal 2 damage is fantastic. So keep this in mind, though. This card, I'm not particularly impressed with this if you have to bounce creatures, because it is just so tempo negative. So it is significantly worse if you do not have the Hopeful Vigils or enchantments like Princess Takes Flight to bounce. We've got Besotted Knight, which I think is best in Selesnya or Orsov, where you care about creating the Royal Roll for 1, because a 3/3 for 4 is not very impressive. But with enough synergies, you can definitely get this to be a desirable card. And it's another one that you can take advantage of, that it wheels. You shouldn't be taking these before pick 8, in my opinion. Then there's Hamlet Glutton, which is best in the Golgari and Simic builds that are really trying to go late and get payoffs for reaching to the 5-mana 6/6 Trampler that gains 3 life. It's a little, you do have a lot of bargain fodder between your rolls, Hopeful Vigils, etc. You should be able to reliably cast this out as a 6/6 Trample on turn 5. I've just found it to be a little bit less important in this archetype because you do have a lot of pressure, and you can kind of already be steamrolling your opponent before turn 5. Curse of the Werefox is best in Simic because Simic has just no good targets for removal, no good options for removal. It's pretty decent in Selesnya, though, because it does give you the monster roll that before your creature fights. So if you have additional synergies with rolls in your deck, then removal that fits into that synergy gets bumped up a bit. We've got Ferocious Werefox, which has been decent filler in every green archetype, and has more of that roll synergy because it's you can use the instant speed adventure to create a monster roll. One thing to keep in mind, though, with Ferocious Werefox is if they remove the target that you're trying to put the monster roll on, then the adventure fizzles. And if the adventure fizzles, then you don't get to play your creature. And so one of the mistakes that I see is playing this into open mana when your opponent has removal up, when it probably would have been better to just play it out as a 4/3 Trampler. And you can take these about average for a common around pick 6 or 7. And then if you are going to go down the route of splashing, the thing that really enables green to be a good place to splash is Brave the Wilds. And I've found that you can cut a land 1 for 1 as long as you have the 8 forests as a minimum. But yeah, if you're looking to play the black cards and the red cards within this archetype, then definitely keep your eyes out for picking up a couple of Brave the Wilds. I had a video where I talked about a lot of the what I aim for when I'm trying to do a draft, kind of some of the strategies and the math behind it. And I didn't really talk about like what's the minimum for a splash. Like if you only have 1 card in your deck, like really what are you going to try to do? And my magic number is 4. So if you include so if you have like 3 Brave the Wilds and the 1 mountain that you're going to go find, right? Then, or like 2 Brave the Wilds and a Prophetic Prism or something like that. That's what I try to look for. So 3 pieces of fixing, including the land as a potential, as a source. Also, we've got Prophetic Prism, which is really good for splashing, and it does have a little bit of a small synergy with Stockpiling Celebrant. So taking it as a target to bounce back to your hand, you get at least draw a card the second time that it comes into play, and so it's okay. I would rather be bouncing other things like Hopeful Vigil, but it can work in a pinch. And now for the uncommons, and Selesnya has 4 mythic level uncommons that you should keep your eyes out for. One of them is Imidane's Recruiter. This one is a top-performing uncommon, but I believe that it performs better in green-white Selesnya and white-black Orsov than any other archetype outside of red-white Boros. And both Orsov and Selesnya, because they care about the amount of rolls, you have a naturally creature-centric strategy from the get-go. So you're really looking to build the board, and the bigger your board is, the better that Imidane's Recruiter performs. We've also got Princess Takes Flight, which Selesnya is its best archetype. Because you not only can use this for removal with stockpiling Celebrants, which isn't limited to Selesnya, but what I really like about it is that when the enchantment goes to the graveyard, if you're going to use it for bargaining and things like that, then there are cards that care about that, and you also have the right balance of tempo, right? So in Selesnya, you're not strictly just trying to loop this 1,000 times and remove all of your opponent's threats like you might be doing in Azorius Control. But you're at that point where you're pressuring your opponent enough that the +2/+2 in flying can work even if you can't find something to remove this card. And then there's also some synergies in green where you get additional bargains. Agatha's Champion and Hamlet Glutton, things like that, allow you to get rid of this card so that they don't get their exiled creature back. So stockpiling Celebrant isn't just your only option. All right, we've got the third mythic level uncommon is Tough Cookie. This one has been really good. So you have additional food synergies work pretty well in Selesnya because you can bargain your rolls in a pinch, but it's better if you don't have to, right? And so I've found that creating the food tokens has worked really nice off of like Hollow Scavenger or Tough Cookie. And then the fact that this can be either life gain to stabilize and erase, or you can animate your food tokens into a 4/4 artifact creature. Just the versatility of which way you want to take this. If you want to use it as like a threatening blocker against your opponent's attackers, Tough Cookie has just been one of my favorite uncommons in the set. And then the fourth mythic level uncommon is Welcome to Sweet Tooth. And I believe that it performs just as well in Selesnya as it does in Golgari. So in Golgari, you really care about it because it gives you another food token, and you have this more likelihood of being able to go turn 1 food, turn 2 Welcome to Sweet Tooth, turn 3 food off of something like Sweet Tooth Witch, and then when this finally resolves, it's just you create any one of your creatures gets like a +4/+4 or whatever, right? In Selesnya, you're less likely to just hit that key amount of food synergy, but it's still, just like Tough Cookie, I've found that the food synergies do work quite nicely in Selesnya, and you are developing the board, and so you have a lot of targets to be able to hit with the +X/+X, and so it's just been very impressive in Selesnya as well. And Threadbind Click, I think, is one that you can look for, especially because I'd rather have like a Threadbind Click than a Curse of the Werefox, right? Like you need to hit a certain amount of removal, and this one works relatively well. And you can take Selesnya into a attrition build, right? You can take it into a more controlling archetype that plays more similarly to Golgari. And if you are in that, then you just want as much removal as you possibly could grab. And Threadbind Click is a pretty good one to just be able to destroy outright any target tapped creature. We've got Royal Treatment, which I've been impressed with in every green archetype, being especially, like I was saying, if you fizzle somebody's adventure side, like if somebody goes to give -2/-2 to something, with a Gingerbread Hunter, and you respond and give it hexproof, it fizzles that adventure, and then they don't get to use it down the road. So Royal Treatment has been just a very impressive uncommon, and the fact that it creates a Royal Roll token is additionally good in a archetype that cares about roll synergies. We've got Utopia Sprawl, which I've also been impressed with in every green archetype, and one of the things that I like about it in Selesnya is that it's especially nice because I have a ton of 3-drops that I'm very interested in playing. So there's a huge Icicle on 3 if you look back at the draft skeleton. So being able to turn 1 Utopia Sprawl and then just immediately start playing your 3-drops on turn 2 has been really nice in this archetype. And then we've got Sir Armont, the Redeemer, and goes without saying that it's best in Selesnya. And so it creates a monster roll, which has synergies with the rest of your deck. And then, most importantly, all of your enchanted creatures you control get +1/+1. So not only are you giving something +2/+2, which is what it's like when you splash this without other additional synergies, but if your whole board is enchanted with roll tokens, then your whole board gets a +1/+1, and this kind of has an Anthem effect. And we've got Woodland Acolyte, and I've not been particularly impressed with this card. The green side of the adventure, putting the card from your graveyard on top of your library and then playing it as a 2/2 that draws a card. I think because the adventure side is kind of a little bit of a trap, Selesnya, I think, is its worst white archetype. And partially this is because of how crowded the selection of 3-drops are in Selesnya. So since it's so overcrowded, I don't really like Woodland Acolyte, but it can work in a pinch. And we've also got Gingerbread Hunter, which is another one that I think Selesnya is its worst green archetype, and I'd rather be splashing for red. And part of it is just how does the tempo of the deck line up, right? And if you're playing in Golgari, if you're playing in Simic, where you've got a little bit of a later plan, being able to go like, okay, well, I'm going to slam these 5-drops and create a food token, and the food token's going to stabilize for me, then that works better. In Selesnya, I've found that like I'm trying to really pressure my opponent more so than putting down these big threats. And splashing for black, like I said, I'd rather be splashing for red. But it can definitely work, especially if you have the Fawnsbane Troll at rare. And Tanglespan Lookout, though, is partly why I'm so low on Woodland Acolyte, specifically in Selesnya, because this is a card that is best in Selesnya and is kind of the cornerstone of the strategy, especially for the card draw. Because whenever an aura, so all of those roll tokens are auras, so whenever they enter the battlefield under your control, you get to draw a card. So, and then we've got Agatha's Champion, which is a good uncommon in every green archetype, and you have plenty of options to trigger the bargain, and then you left over with a 4/4 Trampler, which is not a bad one to have just on the board. Now for the rares, we've got Spellbook Vendor, which I find slightly better in Boros in red-white because of it being able to trigger Celebration for 1. But you do care about rolls, and so being able to create a sorcerer roll works really well in Selesnya. And we've got Gruff Triplets, which is a top-performing rare in every green archetype, so nothing special about it in Selesnya. This card just wins you the game a lot of the time. In Limited, Constructed has so many Wraths, but in Limited, there's just very, very few options that your opponent can do to actually beat the Gruff Triplets. And then we've got the Goose Mother, and I think Selesnya is its best archetype outside of Simic. It is that is how, like, I've been trying to figure out a way to explain how good the food tokens are, specifically in green-white, and the fact that this creates half of X rounded up of food tokens just works really well with the archetype. And this is kind of like, well, okay, if we have the Goose Mom, then start looking at Threadbind Click, right? So like I use a lot of the rares that I'm splashing for to then fill in other things. Like if you picked up Imidane's Recruiter, a mythic level uncommon, then I'd be looking for like, okay, I'm going to splash the cut-ins and the Torch the Towers if I can, right? But yeah, definitely a top performing card and a reason to splash some blue into your Selesnya build. And we've got Archon of the Wild Rose, which has been the top performer in both Orsov and Selesnya. As long as you have enough creatures and roll tokens so that all of your creatures have auras attached to them, when you slam down this, which just as a 4/4 flyer, that's a pretty good stat block as well. But then giving all of your things, making them into 4/4 flyers can just be game winning. We've got the Werefox Bodyguard, which is good in every white archetype. And one of the things that I've been kind of curious about with this card is that we had Brutal Cathar in Constructed that allows you to exile another one of your opponent's creatures. But this one can actually be used as a bodyguard, as the name implies, right? Because it has the ability to sacrifice itself. So, you know, my brain starts scheming of like, well, you could play Gruff Triplets in, and then bring this in to exile the Gruff Triplet, and then sacrifice it so that the Gruff Triplet comes back into play again, so you get another ETB, and you get more 3/3s or whatever, right? So keep this in mind that you can use this in response to your opponent's removal, and then get the card back, which is something that Cathar doesn't, something that it has an advantage to the Brutal Cathar. And then we've got Regal Bunnycorn, which I've found to be better in Orzhov, just slightly. In Selesnya, you still have a lot of non-land permanents with all of the rolls and the tokens and everything. But you're a little bit more likely to be bargaining those off, and compared to Orzhov. And then there's kind of a little bit of like a go wide effect in Selesnya that you don't have in Orzhov. In Orzhov, it's a little bit better to go big with, you know, being able to slam down the Regal Bunny Unicorn and have it be like a 6/6 or an 8/8. But still, you know, there's really good strategy, or really good synergies in any deck that it has like the go wide. If you have a whole lot of non-land permanents that you're aiming to go onto the board, then Regal Bunnycorn is definitely something to look for. And then we've got Huntsman's Redemption, which I still think performs best in Gruul. Being able to go find the red creatures that are adventures as well, whether they be to give double strike to something or make something not block, or like Bruiser. It's just been really impressive with being able to go fetch adventure specifically. But it's still good in every green archetype, and definitely something that, you know, I would still run it in my Selesnya deck. And then we've got a Fonsbane Troll, which is best in Golgari, where you don't have to splash for it, but it does have a lot of synergies with the gratuitous amount of rolls in Selesnya. So you can sacrifice an aura attached to this to have it fight. It comes in with a roll token on it, so it already has that synergies. But then all of your other cards, if you can continue to put roll tokens onto Fonsbane's Troll, it allows you to continue to fight your opponent's threats. So it's got really great synergies in Selesnya, and this is one of those cards that if I do open up Fonsbane Troll, and it's like in pack 3 after I've already decided that I'm going to be in Selesnya, then that's when I'm start like, okay, well maybe we can throw in something like Candy Grapple, especially if we already have the Gingerbread Hunters. So that's kind of what I mean by like this archetype. Keep your mind open to the potential splashes. Looks like we got a little bit of a repeat there. My bad. And then the last one is Virtue of Loyalty. And this one has been a superstar in every white archetype. I think that it is slightly better in Boros, just because of the +1/+1 to each one of your creatures and untap, and creating the 2/2 Night token at instant speed. You're less likely, you're more likely to curve out in Selesnya and not have the untapped mana. Whereas in like Boros, you might have the mana untapped if you were going to flash in the create a treasure off of the Grabby Giant, or create rats out of Ratcatcher Trainee. So I feel like the instant side of the adventure, the instant side of Virtue of Loyalty pairs up a little bit better in Boros, but it's still a fantastic card. So thanks for watching to the end of the video. I hope it gets you those trophies and lets you draft infinitely. I post multiple videos a week. Every weekend I have been doing a constructed focus as well. So if limited's not your jam, then you know, just don't pay attention to this video. I'll be back on Saturday and Sunday for more constructed stuff. And remember to hit like and subscribe for more Magic the Gathering content. I'll be back next Tuesday to cover another drafting archetype. So if you have one in mind, let me know in the comments below. And thank you all for the support.